Doom and Wolfenstein 3D. These are two of the most critically acclaimed games ever due to how innovative they were, and how they were able to push the FPS genre into territories that seemed impossible back in the 90s. Of course, these titles can't stand up to modern titles in terms of, let's say, graphics and sound design, but that doesn't mean that they aren't fundamentally very sound and established games, because they are. You can still go back to a game like the original Doom and have a great time regardless of things being outdated. It really goes to show just how well made they are. So good, in fact, that retro shooters are still being kept alive through great titles such as Warhammer 40k Boltgun. The Warhammer 40k series is something that I personally was very unfamiliar with, which is why a game like Boltgun came as such a surprise to me. In fact, I didn't even know this game existed until the very day that it came out and showed up on my Steam homepage. It's a good example of how games can still come out of the blue and still be completed experiences that are fun to play even without massive marketing pushes. I had the same experience earlier in 2023 when I played through Hi-Fi Rush. That was another game that came out of nowhere, and I was immensely surprised by the quality of that experience. It's great when games end up being good and you didn't even have any expectations for them.
Ooh, that's good.
Now, in the case of Boltgun, there's going to be a couple of varying viewpoints for a game like this. There will be some people who get bored of Boltgun because for roughly 8 hours, you're doing very similar things, such as shooting and more shooting. Then there will be players who are quite fond of the retro aesthetic and the satisfying combat, who found this to be a blast the entire way through. I fall somewhere in between these two camps. The game quickly drew me in with that retro feel, and I immediately thought back to the first time that I played through the original Doom, as well as Wolfenstein 3D. The nostalgia factor in Boltgun started to fade a bit after the first hour or so of the game, and I started to look at it as a more mindless, satisfying, standalone shooter, which isn't really a bad thing. The game is literally named after the primary weapon that you start the game with, so you know it's not going to be all that much deeper than that. That's okay, because the bolt gun itself, as well as every other gun, is very fun to use, and what kept me playing was the progression of unlocking all the guns one at a time. You start off with the bolt gun, and it's a very versatile weapon. It's effective at all ranges, and ammo is very plentiful. You can even get special ammo types for the bolt gun, such as mods that make you shoot quicker or shoot fire rounds, for example, and the animations for all the effects are fantastic. It wouldn't be a classic boomer shooter without your boomstick.
This is my boomstick!
The shotgun is messy, it's pretty quick, and it feels very powerful even from a good distance. Any retro shooter has to get the shotgun right, and Boltgun does just that. The heavy bolter is extremely heavy. It takes a brief second for it to wind up, but once it does, you'll typically find yourself holding down left click and listening to the weapon unleash hell because it's so satisfying to let this thing run.
Now that's a lot of damage!
Not every weapon is running on typical rounds in this game though. There's laser beam type weapons, there's a plasma cannon, there's grenade launchers, there's other very overpowered things too to turn you into a heretic stomping space marine that you deserve to be. I mean, look at the cover art of the game, man. Very Doom-esque, and it just looks sick. I mean, don't you want to play as this guy right here?
Yes, sir, I do.
Oh, and you can't forget about the chainsaw, or the chain sword, should I say. At any time, you could whip out the chain sword and slow down time using it as a lock-on to reach targets from a distance. It finishes off weaker enemies in just one hit, or you could use it on larger enemies too to put a nice dent in their health bar. You could also spam the melee button or hold it down to extend the duration of it. The most effective and most fun weapon to me has to be the Melt-A-Gun. It has the word melt in the name, so you pretty much already know what it's going to be used for. Just one devastating blast of the Melt-A-Gun can take out sometimes an entire group of enemies. It could pierce walls as well. It's just extremely overpowered and fun to use, but ammo for it is quite scarce. Hold on, let me pause and make a correction. I was kind of exaggerating a bit with the Melt-A-Gun. Let me show you the actual most overpowered weapon in the game.
that's a lot of damage!
Yeah, that's more like it. That was the grav cannon. A common theme in boomer shooters is to make the player feel powerful, and they do that in Boltgun by making every weapon feel like you could completely shred through enemies, at least the weaker ones. However, at the same time, it isn't necessarily always easy. In fact, I found myself dying out of nowhere so many times in this game because you can't really tell when you're taking damage. That was my biggest issue with the game. There isn't really any way to tell when you're taking real damage in the heat of combat. One instance you feel like a badass space marine, and then 1 second later you drop dead like a weakling. Kinda takes you out of it. A man that looks like this should never die. Luckily there is a taunt button and you could spam it at any time to make yourself feel better after getting wrecked.
I am proud to serve and proud to die. You will die!
Again, Boltgun is named after a weapon, so the story doesn't get too much past the point of go here and kill all these unholy aliens. That's not to discredit the good story beats that are here, because there are some that I enjoyed. There's some fun stylized cutscenes, and they give you a little bit more insight into your mission and why exactly you're in the situation that you're in. Fun fact, the game is actually a sequel to Warhammer 40k Space Marine from 2011. This made literally no sense to me when I looked it up and found that out. I thought it was so obscure to make a sequel to a game from 12 years ago and have them be completely different types of shooters. If anyone has actually played the 2011 game, please let me know. I need to know if it's good and how they managed to connect these two games. Boltgun is a game where you know exactly what you're getting with it. For only 20 bucks, you get a very solid shooter experience that will ignite your nostalgia receptors. It satisfies that itch that anybody who has ever played an FPS game has. The itch to decimate hundreds upon thousands of 2D sprites in the messiest way possible. It's got everything you need in a game like this. Fun gunplay, tons of enemies to kill, old school power-ups, and even secret doors. Don't forget about the killer soundtrack either. The art style is great, I love the way the bosses look, and they have some good boss fights as well. Except for this one where the boss gets stuck and I just stood here shooting him for like 3 straight minutes, but we'll ignore that. You should probably check the game out if any of this sounds remotely interesting to you, or else you're just a heretic.
Heretic!